Web, it's the slot we call Media Watch. Sir, tell us, there must be a great deal of reaction about Libya. Is it necessarily coming from Libya?
Very little actually is coming from Libya. And let's take a look at the computer right now to tell you exactly why. Feb 17 Voices, which is one of the activist websites, they note and they explain it all right here. Widespread difficulties in reaching residents of Tripoli by cell phone are very likely due to power outages. Now, this is one of the hallmarks of the Libyan revolution, which has been very different than the other Arab Spring revolutions that we've seen.
I was going to say, because it was massive in Egypt and massive in Tunisia,
Massive in Tunisia, even a lot coming out of Syria, but very little coming out of Libya. And that's in part because there's been this network resolution problem. And the problem is that the networks have been off. The phone networks have been off. Also, you have a very small country relative to Egypt. Egypt's a country of 90 million people. So even if 1% of that population is connected and wired with smartphones and those phones that can take pictures and upload, that's still a lot of people. Libya is 6 million people.
Can I ask you the skeptical question? Was it because things are being blocked by the Gaddafi regime?
Absolutely. And so the Gaddafi regime, and they had what they call the dictator's dilemma. That is, the Gaddafi family controlled the phone networks. And this was the same problem we had and we saw in Tunisia with the Ben Ali family as well. When they shut those networks down, they also lost a lot of money and they lost their own connection to the outside world. Now we're looking at problems of a shortage of fuel, which powers the generators, which ultimately powers the cell phone network. So a lot of the media that we're seeing coming out of Libya right now is professional media. It's the people like us who go down with sat phones and generators and we can then transmit out. Let's take a look at what we are seeing out there. And again, going back to Twitter here, one of the big questions that people are focusing on right now is, where is Muammar Gaddafi? Gaddafi is definitely still in Tripoli, says Liberty for Libya. Again, another activist group. Confidence of his presence is indicated by the lack of escape on behalf of his sons and daughters. So a lot of the mainstream media as well as Twitter are following this kind of the next stage of the adventure, which is, where is Muammar Gaddafi? Is he in fact still in the country? Is he still alive?
So we're lacking that kind of personal insight that we were getting from people, say, from Tahrir Square in Cairo,
right.
from the center of Tunis when things were happening there. We're not getting those kind of individual stories.
You know, what we got out of Tahrir Square was a site called BAM User, and that was what allowed people to use their cell phone. Even in Syria today, we're seeing this, to broadcast live. It's that type of intimate portrayal that we're seeing of the revolution that we're not seeing in Libya. What we are seeing are some pictures that come up, and let's take a look at this one. These were on Sunday night. This is a picture of what appears to be wounded rebels, and they're celebrating on August 21st, of course, the rush into Tripoli. Now, one has to be a little skeptical of some of these pictures. Now, this looks like an authentic picture of people. Now, how did they get these pictures out? Remember, there is a battle for the narrative going on here, and there's always been a battle in all of these conflicts. We're seeing that in Syria right now, about who is telling the story and that's going to write history. So one has to be a kind of question, how is it possible that the rebels are able to get these pictures out, but nobody else isn't?
Is it one of the issues, I think, Eric, might be that the rebels are formed of disparate groups, separate groups with different interests, and maybe, someone has control over one issue and one way of getting something out. Maybe
it's that, and also the rebels have access to resources that the average person doesn't. So say, the French government, the American government have given lots of money to these rebel groups, and they have sat phones and they have generators, and they're able to get this out. When you're the only pictures that are out there, again, take a picture like this. This is a picture of the rebel flag, people celebrating. This, of course, is the narrative that the rebel movement wants to portray. This is victorious. At the end of the day, though, we as consumers of this information have to put a little skeptical eye here. Again, why are the rebels being able to get this out and no one else is? It's only one very small part of the story. I'm not saying that these aren't authentic, but again, you're seeing only one side of that story.
We need to look upon this with
a little bit of a discerning
clear eye, discerningly, and actually examine why this is out and what it's about.
And what are we missing here? There's a lot of stories that we're not getting. We're not getting pro-Gaddafi side of the story. Not to say that that is a good or a bad thing, but at the end of the day, we're not getting that side of the story.
It would be nice to have it, wouldn't it?
It would be nice to have it. We're not getting that individual personal, that what we talked about earlier, that intimate, kind of what the man on the street, what the average young person, we're missing that part of the story. So when we only see images like this, it's very much just one part of the story, and I really caution people to kind of step back a little bit and say, this is good, but what are we missing?
Of course, those fairly chilling images that we saw emerging from Libyan state television of the female presenter waving a gun around. I mean, it shows that in terms of the media, we're dealing in a whole different ballgame, aren't we, completely? I mean, I've never imagined that I would ever see someone waving a gun around saying, if the rebels come here, we're going to shoot them.
Again, part of the narrative. And this is all part of the drama and the theater of the media. Now, the media in this sense is the traditional media, state-controlled media. A lot of these people know, and this is the same problem we saw in Cairo as well, people who've been carrying the public line, the government line for so many years on state-controlled media are seen as an extension of that government and have really no sympathy among the people who now are seeking to overthrow them. So there's a lot of concern that they will go down with the Gaddafi government. So you can see very bold, kind of extreme measures being taken there. Let's take a quick look at how some of the more traditional media is covering the story. This has been the dominant story today across some of the big papers. Loyalist holdouts fight rebels in Tripoli. So very much the New York Times kind of focusing on the battle. Interestingly enough, China's major foreign newspaper, hunt is on for Gaddafi. Now, China's been very, very apprehensive in covering these types of events as aggressively as they're doing with Gaddafi. And in part, that's because the Chinese really want to make sure that they're going to be present in the post-Gaddafi era. And so one of the indications that we're seeing from Chinese media is that they're very strong pro-rebel coverage of their media. Finally, let's take a quick look at one of the new trends coming out are the cartoons that emerge very quickly. And this is and some of the more funny things. So here we go. We've got on the left here Ben Ali. We've got Gaddafi. We've got Mubarak. And so 1, 4, 3, 2. And this is really a message.
Number 4 is Saleh from Yemen.
Saleh from Yemen as well. And so really trying to kind of just with some humor to say who's next. And of course, everybody is pointing to the Syrians. Finally, take a look here. This is a cartoon that was circulating a lot on across Twitter and on Facebook today. On the right, the Europeans and the Americans with their oil rigs. In the middle, the happy rebel. And then with his bum on fire, Mr. Gaddafi with a white flag.
Nicely put. Eric Hollander, thank you very much for bringing us a little bit of humour in what is a very serious day for the people of Libya and, of course, across the Arab world. Eric, thank you very much indeed. That was Media Watch. I urge you to stay with us. We've got more news to come here on France 24.